Hello and welcome to the Community Voice. I'm Fara Sax. I have the privilege of my guest today, Paulette Pfeiffer, but she goes by the name of Tinkerbell, and she lights up when I say Tinkerbell. She was born in Russia and raised in South America. She is a first-generation Holocaust survivor, and she's also fluent in 4 languages. In 2005, she founded the Silent Victims of Crime, SVC, for the children of incarcerated parents. Tinkerbell's kids' motto is empowering children to soar beyond adversity. Tinkerbell joins me today, and it's an incredible pleasure. Thank you so much.
Same here. It's a pleasure, Farah. I've been looking forward to this, actually. It's been great.
So have I. And how did you get from being a survivor to forwarding and being the face of SVC? Talk about your journey and your bio and where you grew up and how that all influenced.
I'm actually Polish. My entire family is Polish. And I'm about to go get my Polish rights because I have a birth certificate from Poland. But my parents were hiding during the Holocaust in Russia. And it was my parents and my one more couple that escaped the Holocaust because they were in Poland. There were only 200 survivors of millions. So my parents did the right thing. But when they escaped, they left the whole family behind, and they all got exterminated.
How old were you when this happened?
I was born in, we think, we're not 100% sure, in April of 1945. It could have been a few months earlier, it could have been later, but by the time we got to Poland, I guess it was April 3rd of 1945, but my parents walked from Russia to Poland with me in their arms. I was only a few months old. And there's no truth to the story. There's only messages, words from other family members, one other family member who thinks I was already a year old when we crossed. And so they took freight cars, illegally, obviously, on and off, and walked from Russia to Poland. So when we got to Poland, my mom wanted to get me my birth certificate because there's no way on earth she was going to say I was born in Russia. That's not where I was meant to be. I was meant to be in Poland. But when they got there, the family that owned my mother's house, my mother's whole family house, wouldn't even let them in to look at it. And my mom decided not to fight it and left Poland. And we were told that if we went to Germany, that they were helping Jews. And my mom and dad were in starvation, and so was I. So we needed food, we needed shelter, and we needed someplace to go. And so we went to Germany, and when we got there, there's a place called Feldafing. And Feldafing had a camp. And this camp was a former Nazi youth training camp. So they trained kids how to kill Jews. And that's where we were housed. There were about 200 bunk beds, or at least that's how my mom described it. And we never counted every one of them. There was one bathroom, and there was a little window. And to me, in my memory, it had bars. I don't know if it did, but it was just a small window with a little bit of light coming into this cave-like atmosphere. But as a child, you don't know that anything is wrong because my parents were amazing. My parents did not discuss the atrocities. They only talked about a future. So I didn't know I was in a bad place. I didn't know that I was dying or could have died. I had no idea. And so they opened up a school eventually at the camp. I was there for 5 years, from 45 until 50, the end of 49. And my sister was born in the camp. And in the camp, we found out that my mother's sister married my father's brother, and they were alive.
Wow, mishpucha with mishpucha, family with family.
Yes, and we were like in ecstasy. And we also, my father's sister survived because she was in Russia with us, and she had a daughter. And Lila and I were like inseparable for all the time we were there. And then suddenly I have pictures of all these children growing in this school. So we had a little school with all these children, and I thought I was in a normal world. And so my daughter Dana, my baby daughter, actually found a video with Eisenhower coming out of our camp. And then Dave Lawrence, a friend of mine, sent me a book that's called The Last Million, and it talks about my family's journey. I read the whole book. It's this thick with tiny little writing, but when Dave gives me something, I read it.
He's the Children's Trust.
Yes. And the Children's Movement and the Miami Herald.
Does great work for the community. Shout out.
Actually, we're going to be on a boat on Friday, the two of us. And I got to tell him what happened in Tallahassee. So I'll get to Tallahassee.
Somehow I think we will. You'll take me there, Tinkerbell, with your little wings.
Tinkerbell was not my name at the time. I didn't get to be Tinkerbell until about 32 years ago.
And had that happen, but we didn't finish with the story. So so there you were in this encampment, and then how did you get from there to Miami? Don't say an airplane.
No,
but,
no,
but
it wasn't.
When did all that happen? How did that?
Well, what happened was in the camp they were giving us food and doctors, so we were able to survive. And the people there, many of them died while they were in the camp. They did not make it, even though they were alive when they got there, because lack of food and lack of whatever, all the necessities. And so my parents were looking constantly, how do we get into America? How do we get into America? And so they found that if we go to Argentina, you can get into America. So my parents found a way. How they always did, I don't know, because they had a tiny little bit of money. Because in the camp, they would give them food, and my father would sell us food for somebody's watch. And then he would take the watch and sell the watch and get, let's say, gold earrings, whatever he could get. So they had a little bit of money, very little, obviously. And we left the camp and went to Argentina.
How old were you?
5. And then from Argentina, it was all Nazis. So my parents, and we were living right with the Nazis. So my mom
Was Judaism hidden at that time?
I think Judaism and Nazism were both hidden, but they always put us next to each other. So the country knew.
You felt it. You knew.
I did not feel it.
But
I didn't know
your parents
anything.
knew.
My parents knew. They always knew because she always said, "Be careful of those people next door." She always said that in every country. So then we go from Argentina. My mother finds out that if you go to Bolivia, there is a quota that opened up to go into America. So we run to Bolivia, spent 5 years in Bolivia.
So you were 10 at the time?
Years. So I was about 10, correct, from Bolivia, and grew up with Bolivian children, Bolivian Indians. So we were ostracized quite a bit. Children would throw water at us. They would scream and yell when they saw us because we both have this white kinky hair, this blonde kinky hair. And so they were afraid of us. But we were there for 4.5, 5 years. My father, we couldn't make a living. So my sister was fine, but we didn't have very much food. We had very little food. And my father used to sometimes chew up the food because it was old and stale and feed us, me and my sister. And when the grandkids heard the stories, they went, that's disgusting. He did something. We were hungry. And to my dad, that's the way to give us food.
He was really your saviors.
Oh my God, my dad was amazing. My mom was amazing. We had amazing parents because until I was in Brazil, I didn't even know I was in the Holocaust. I didn't even know my family was killed. I didn't know anything.
When did you come to America? How old were
We
you?
came to the United States in April of 1959. And
Was it in Miami?
It was in New York, Brooklyn, New York. And we arrived at the airport, and I remember the doors open, and I could barely see. I was 14. My sister was 13, 12 and a half, or 13. I could barely see because it was so bright. It looked like diamonds everywhere. It was snowing, and it was my birthday.
So it was like whatever the Almighty sent you snow on your birthday. What a birthday present.
Not only that, I hadn't seen snow all the years that I lived in Brazil, because I was in Brazil for those 5 years. In Brazil, my parents opened up a little business. So for the first time, we actually had an apartment. Because before that, we lived in a room, one room, all of us. And we didn't care. Nobody cared.
You didn't know any different.
As children, we didn't know the difference. No, my sister and I would run around. She was like my baby sister, even though she's only a year and a half younger than I am. And so we get to the United States, and my father went ahead of us, and he was able to bring us in 6 months after that. But we had a rough life without knowing it.
Absolutely.
Without realizing it. But I know I always, when people would say, what do you want to do when you grow up? People always ask you that when you're a kid. And I remember always saying, I want to take care of kids. Because in a way, in the camp, I was one of the older ones.
So you came to Miami at what year?
We didn't come to Miami for many, many years.
So you were in Brooklyn at that
We
time?
were in Brooklyn, New York, living on Prospect Park.
Okay, I know
Primarily
it well.
black
Yeah.
community.
But you were a minority with minorities.
But we didn't know either, because in Brazil, everybody's either black, white, or mulatto, and nobody looks at color. So living in a black community didn't
Fit right in to what you knew.
I didn't know the difference. We were happy. We were doing fine. We weren't allowed to go to the park by ourselves. But other than that, we didn't know the difference.
So you came to Miami. How old were you?
Well, I married twice before I came to Miami. So I married the first time when I was 16 to an Arab guy who was from Syria, a Jewish Arab who considered himself a king because he was a Kohen. So
That was the Holy of Holies.
the holiest of holiest, and there were articles in the New York Times. I remember I didn't start reading them until my husband Neil, my second husband, found the articles that said about they called them J-Dubs, or the Jews.
Oh, right,
They
J-Dubs.
called them the SYs.
Yeah. I know that well. That's like Deal, New Jersey thing.
Oh my God!
I know that.
Deal. They all moved to Deal.
That's what I know.
Oh my
that
God!
from.
That's hysterical.
J-Dub, that was someone that wasn't
wasn't
Syrian, but Jewish. Yeah, the whole thing.
But to marry a king, a Syrian king, you had to be a virgin and you had to be very young. So I was 16 when I met him.
Thank God.
And he was 20.
Wow.
This king walks into my house driving like what I thought was the most incredible car on earth. He had an old Buick. But what does a 16-year-old know?
Simple things in life, It's all good.
I would go after the car and I'd say, oh my God, he's got a boat. He's driving a boat. And he asked my father to marry me very quickly, and my father said, over my dead body. But I married him anyway.
Wow.
I was 17, he was 20. And I didn't know what I was doing. I just thought, oh my God, he's so charming, he's so intelligent, he knows so much, and he was cute.
So we're in Miami now.
So I got divorced and moved to Chicago on a big contract that I had with a company, a very big company, a Fortune 500 company. And then I got divorced, and while I was in New York, moved to Chicago. And I think I moved to Chicago to meet my husband, the love of my life. His name is Neil, and he's my best pal. And we've been married for 25 years. I was single for 25, and I was married for 16.
Oh my gosh! So you really have been able to know what you want.
You know what? This is my 4th part of my life, and I'm about to start lobbying for a bill that I wrote about 10 years ago.
And that's yesterday when I confirmed our time together. You were coming back from Tallahassee. Talk about silent victims, how we got to this moment together from your past, how you pulled from that into what you're doing now. You talked about bars that you actually that you really saw or in your imagination, but here you are working with the incarcerated and their children. So,
well, I was working at the U.S. Attorney's Office. I had a contract with the U.S. Attorney for 12 years in Eastern District of New York. I'm going to date myself completely. Giuliani was in the Southern District. I was in the Eastern District, which was Brooklyn, and he was in the Southern District, Manhattan. So I was bumping into him all the time, and even then he didn't know who I was. Every day I saw him, and he didn't know who I was. So even though he was a genius in trials, he was not the most friendliest human being. But I got very close to DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency. My office was in the Drug Enforcement Agency, and I started working there. I didn't have a college degree. I didn't have a high school diploma. I married very young. I hadn't graduated. And they wouldn't allow married people to go to school at that time. And so I decided to work for the U.S. Attorney's Office. I have no idea how that came into my head, other than the fact that my sister, it's actually a cute story. I was in a courtroom in Brooklyn with my sister. She was getting a divorce. And they were doing, the judge was speaking to someone that was pleading not guilty, but the translator was saying he's guilty. Oh, yes, I knew what I was doing because I was hiding under my wife's skirt, which in Spanish means I was embarrassed. Didn't mean I was hiding under my wife's skirt. He was embarrassed because he wasn't dressed, and the police dropped in, and it was totally incorrect translation. So I'm telling my sister, that guy is doing the opposite of what the guy actually said. So my sister says, Your Honor, my sister says he's translating incorrectly. That was the beginning of my career.
Wow.
I got to be an interpreter for the U.S. Attorney's Office.
What did you learn during that time that you bring forth to what you're doing?
Well, I decided to learn more. I started looking at trials. I actually went into courtrooms and started watching trials in the federal court. I wasn't interested in the divorces and, family.
You wanted the hard stuff.
I wanted the hard stuff because I was always interested in that when I watched movies or read books. And so I started watching trials and I said, oh my God, they're all doing it incorrectly. How can that be? First of all, they were saying it in the third person. He says, she says, which when you read it is ridiculous. Why aren't they saying, I'm saying, or, I went and I did and I went and I saw. Instead of saying that, they were saying everything in third person, number one. Number two, they were translating totally grammatically, totally incorrect, because the way something is said in one language is not the meaning in another language. So they didn't understand that they should translate the meanings, not the words. And so I found myself a professor in New Jersey who had taught law in 3 countries. And I went to school for months and months, and he let me go to class. And my husband didn't know about it because I didn't tell him. Because if I told him, he wouldn't let me. My ex-husband. And
that's why he's your ex-husband.
Yeah, that's exactly why he is, because I learned enough of law, not of law, but translating legal terminology, courtroom procedure, elementary law, that when I went to the courthouse where my sister got me to think about being an interpreter, that I went back to that courthouse and I said, do you know where the federal courthouse is? And they said, yeah, right down the block. And I went to the federal courthouse and I said, the state court sent me to go see, what's his name? Oh my God, I forgot his name. But he was the U.S. attorney at the time, Bernie Freed. Oh my God. That was like 60 years ago. Oh, wow. Bernie Freed. So I went, so it had to be after, 97 is when, no, 97 is when I got married again. So it was like 79. I got divorced in 70. So this was 1979, 1980. So I went to I said, I came here, the state court sent me to go see Bernie Freed, the U.S. attorney. They really did send me because I asked them.
Wow.
And I got in upstairs. And when I got in upstairs, he said, who are you? I said, I'm here to tell you that you're going to have a lawsuit in your hands with millions of lawsuits because everything in your courtroom is incorrectly translated. And he said, what are you talking about? Who are you? And I gave him the example of the hiding under the skirts. And then I gave him a few other examples. And he said, but who are you? I said, I just come from Jersey. I know how to translate law, legal terminology, courtroom procedure, elementary law. And he says, what do you mean? It doesn't exist. I said, what do you mean it doesn't exist? No, the class doesn't exist, but I learned how to translate the right correctly. And he goes, I'm going in the courtroom with you for one of the international trials. And you tell me, well, anyway, I got a 12-year contract, year by year.
Wow.
And I worked with DEA. They gave me an office inside DEA. So I worked with the DEA, and I started working on extraditions, international extraditions. And that's how I got started in law and working with courts. And I really loved it. I loved it. And then when I did a lot of telephone recordings, and I would translate the recording reel to reel. I would take it home at night.
That was a long bygone era, wasn't it?
Oh my God, reel to reel, go back and forth every time I wrote something down.
Little button, those big things, they were big. So when you were doing that,
I started asking them, where are your kids?
That's what I was
That's how
gonna say.
long ago I started. In 73, I started working there. 83. 83, I started working there. That can't be 83. It had to be before 75. I started doing a little bit of trials, right? And 80 in 79, when I was getting divorced, I was going to Washington to lobby for a bill. Like, what did I know about a bill?
It's like Forrest Gump, when he walked in and he's with the presidents and he doesn't know how the heck he got there, but he's there standing with all the presidents of the past. So you really had nerve, chutzpah. You really knew in your heart, with your passion, what needed to be done.
Well, I don't know that I knew. I knew it was wrong. I didn't know what the right thing was. I knew that it was wrong and that they weren't trained, that they didn't understand a legal proceeding. They didn't understand the legal terminology. They didn't understand medical terminology. They didn't understand how things are done because they were just people, next door neighbor would be a translator.
Absolutely.
Somebody down the block was a translator in those days. So translating is paper, but interpreting is out loud.
Absolutely.
So when they translated out loud, when interpreted out loud, they really did it incorrectly because it was all third person. So I started looking at what was wrong with the process, but I also started looking at where are the kids? Like, what happens to your kids?
Tell me how. Let's talk about the silent victims of crime. Let's get back.
That's how it started.
So that's how it started. This is.
I started finding out that they didn't see the kids.
2005, you created this.
This in 73. In 78, the bill was already passed. So in 77, I was lobbying for the bill. That's how I got divorced. You just brought me right back there.
Oh boy!
I got divorced.
I'm sorry. Don't throw a knife. Thank God there's no knives or guns here.
No, my ex-husband actually said, "You go to Washington one more time, I won't be here. Do you think they're listening to what you're saying? They're watching you move, you tush." And I went, "What?" I mean, I've been studying. I went to school. I was doing all kinds of things I was proud of.
So he watched your tush right out the door.
Right out the door.
So let's talk about silent victims. Let's go back to that. Let's talk about Tinkerbells. Let's talk about Tinkerbell's kids and how you got your name and where'd that come from? Because when I called you on the phone, it was Paulette, and you go, no, my name is Tinkerbell. Well, you are. I'm ready for Peter Pan to show up too. You're very effortless.
My husband sometimes dresses as Peter Pan. Sometimes.
I don't blame him.
So I was in Chicago with 12 kids. I already was doing programs. I did programs in New York, and then I did them in Illinois, and then in South Carolina, and then here. So New York was literally picking up children when I found out that they don't know where the kids are. And I said, they don't come to visit you ever? Never. Because I was working with the court, with DEA, and with the defense attorneys. I was doing a trial with 21 people in Macon, Georgia, and I was the interpreter for everyone and for the private lawyers as well. So I was in prison translating, I was in court translating, and then translating when they were with their families.
What is the mission? What is the mission of
The mission of silent victims of crime is to make sure that these children no longer go back to prison, that they're not the next generation of prisoners, and that we teach them to be healthy and strong and see the fairness of life. So the mission has changed several times. So I can quote it if you want, the real mission, or I can just tell you what I believe it is.
You tell me, because it's in your solar plexus, I think.
The mission is to keep these children out of prison, because what I was watching after I started looking for children of prisoners is that they were the next generation of prisoners.
So it's a repeat.
No
it's
study.
a repeat. It's a history again
and
again.
Over and over again, because I started looking at why. And you couldn't find anything in the 70s and 80s. You couldn't go into an internet and say, are there any programs about children of prisoners? Are there any studies done on children of prisoners? I had to go to Washington, to the Library of Congress, to look up anything. So I was traveling to Washington to look up reports and studies.
Tinkerbell goes to Washington again and again, or to Tallahassee.
And I started writing letters to Washington.
And what were some of the patterns that you did see? What do you see now with your work?
70% of the children of prisoners will get involved with the prison system in a negative way.
Meaning?
Meaning, they're raised in a criminal home, they're raised in a criminal neighborhood, and they're raised with the only options is selling drugs or being in a gang. Nobody tells them about going into business. Nobody tells them about going to college. Never. It's not even brought up. And yet in a typical middle-class home and upper homes, it's always mentioned, when you go to college, this is what's going to happen. It's never brought up.
So how do you safeguard? What does Tinkerbell's kids do to help them so that they don't become those, repeat the history of their family members?
Number one, we take them out of their environment every other weekend. It used to be every weekend in South Carolina. Here, every other weekend. We send a car. It used to be limousines when we had a contract with them, and he had a stroke, and unfortunately, no limos. But we used to pay the same for a limo that we pay now for an Uber or for a private car. So we take the car, send the car to the family home, pick up the children, bring them to a location. And every week we send out a flyer with the location that it's going to be.
And what happens in those locations during those
We
those
hide
respites?
all of our training under the umbrella of let's have fun. So the kids are going to show up. Let's say we go to the Florida Grand Opera, right? We do that all the time. Florida Grand Opera, or we take them kayaking, or we'll take them to the zoo. But each time they think they're going somewhere to play. When they're 5, we take them, and they're still with us 10, 20 years later. We have kids in our program, still in our program.
So you have kids from
25.
the age of 5 to
5
20?
to 18 usually. 5 to
18.
18 is when we take them. But usually we accept them in the program from 5 to 13. But if they have older siblings, we take them as well. So some of them are 18. And we show up at a location, like let's say the Florida Grand Opera, and they're all dressed up and they came in a limo, and the doors are open for them by the staff because they know us. And those kids walk in like kings. And we treat them like kings.
How many kids are involved in this on a
220 right now.
During-
223 right now because we
220.
just started a program for Miami-Dade in the jails.
So tell me what else you're doing so that our
So we
audience
take the children to events that they never would have gone to, and we make sure that during the event they're learning something new. And let's say the Florida Grand Opera, it's about learning to appreciate other kinds of music because they just want to listen to rap. So they go into the opera room. They don't want to go there. They say, I'm not going there. And I go, then I'll stand out here with you the whole time. And we have Wes Saunders, who is a former football player. He's 6'7", my baby brother. And he'll pick up 3 of them and says, you're coming with me and you're sitting with me. And I said, guys, read up there. It tells you what they're saying. And they go, oh, those people kill people too? You know, I took them to an opera where they were killing.
Oh, that's what else is happening? Either you die or get killed in an opera.
That's exactly right.
What's the alternative? A happy life? Never.
That's true. Never.
Oh, mea culpa.
Never.
Never.
It's like country western songs. You lose everything and then they all come back.
That's right. That's right. You find your love finally, whatever that means.
Whatever that means. I found my love, so I know what it means.
You found your love in many places.
I
It
do.
seems like. Talk about this. Let's talk about the passion. Let's talk about Tinkerbell's kids. What do they mean to you, these kids?
They're like my extended family. They're all extended family with each other because they grow up together. It's at least 5 years together, and they're usually 10 or 12 or 15. They're forever.
How are you sponsored? How do you get your money?
We get sponsored. We used to get sponsored in South Carolina by the federal government. We got $500,000 every year. We got the Second Chance Act, which the years and years of writing to Washington, it paid off because they started putting out millions of dollars for children of prisoners, and we were one of the first funded. And we got $500,000, same as Clemson University, who was on our board and wrote their own grant.
And you mentioned something about Mayor Cava.
And so when we came to Miami, we were working in partnership with 9 other agencies that were doing prison visitation. But we separated from them right after, just before COVID. And we only did prisons, federal and state prisons, because that's when we could decide, do we take this child who's got a parent that's away for 3 years or 5 years? We preferred 5. So Cava, at one event that I was doing with honoring Dave Lawrence, Mayor Cava walked in and came over to me and gave me an award and said to me, I want you to start your program in my jails. And I said, no, I can't. And she goes, what do you mean you can't? I said, in jails, they're only in there for weeks or months. They're waiting trials. I said, I don't have enough time to work with the kids. So she said, I want you to think about it, and I want you to come see me. 2 weeks later, I said, I figured it out. So we have a really wonderful program with about 87 people to 85 people. And it's a pilot. She allowed me to do a pilot. So it's going to be the first year pilot. We did the first visitation about a month and a half ago. We have 20 volunteers.
Are these
We have-
psychologists? Are these
Some of them are
psychologists?
therapists, some of them are lawyers, some of them, like Representative Marie Whitson, surprised us and walked in. She's a friend, and she walked in and said, "I want to see what you do." And it was amazing. Having these children hug their parents for the first time in 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, not having touched each other.
Because they were incarcerated.
The parents are incarcerated and they didn't allow visits. But Kava said, "I want to change the system, and I want to do it with you bringing kids."
Tinkerbell, I could talk to you all day. We could probably talk for hours and hours and hours, but I just want to get the information out. silentvictimsofcrime.org to get more information, or you can call it 305-482-3339 to speak to a live person. And much strength to you, much health to you, and thank you for all the work that you do for our community.
Thank you. Just one more important thing.
Go ahead.
In 30 years, only 3 children went to jail.
From the,
From the whole
program that
and
you
70% of children in statistics go to jail or prison if they have parents who are incarcerated.
Tinkerbell, may you spread your magical fairy dust over all the children and the families that need you. And thank you. It's been my pleasure being with you here
Thank you
today.
so much, Farah.
Thank you.
Next time I interview you.
Never know. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Fara Sax. Until next time.